Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of Game Junk Reviews. This time we'll be reviewing God of War Ragnarok, a game that was released in 2022, being reviewed in 2023. My name is Frank.
My name is Sean.
And my name is Andrew.
So we've all taken some time to play this game. One of the most anticipated games of 2022 was neck and neck with Elden Ring in terms of Game of the Year consideration, and we'll be digging into it. We're going to take a slightly different format with this one at Sean's suggestion, which I think is very good. First, we're going to have kind of a general discussion about the game and avoid spoilers. Then we will do a section on gameplay spoilers. So move sets, bosses, stuff of that nature that would kind of be spoiler in terms of the gameplay. And then at the end, a story spoiler section. I don't know how much there will be there, but we'll get into that a bit. So that's the general direction we're going to take with this. So I guess I'll just say I played the game and I 100%ed it. I did every side quest, every collectible. I did it all in God of War Ragnarok, and my thoughts will be slightly affected by that. I'll get into specifics in the spoiler gameplay discussion. What did you guys do, or what was your playthrough experience or style for God of War Ragnarok?
So I did mostly just focused on the main quest. I did some side quests, and surprisingly, I still put in, I think, like, what was it, 45 hours or something on this game, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, there's lots of stuff I haven't done yet, and I was not trophy hunting or anything like that. So that doesn't really enter into my thoughts.
And I played it pretty similarly to Sean. I only did it in 38 hours, so I may have done a little less of the side quests, but I felt like I did a lot of side quests up to a certain point where I began trying to rush through the game to just try to finish it for this review. So yeah, I would say I did a lot of the early side quests, and then the later stuff I just ignored.
All right. Sounds like you both spent quite a bit of time with the game. It is a relatively long game without side quests, and there is a lot of extra content in the game. So this game takes place immediately after the end of God of War, or pretty close to the ending of that game. It's almost a direct continuation. And I think that's one of the major criticisms with the game, that it doesn't do that much different from the original. And I guess my take on the game is that's why I like it. And where Elden Ring basically takes Dark Souls or From Software type games and turns it into an open world game, and that's kind of what's innovative about it, I think God of War Ragnarok is kind of getting forgotten about in terms of what it brings to the table in terms of reusing existing ideas. And I think that's what makes it truly unique, that a lot of sequels, to their own detriment, add too many systems. They change a game that was already working. And what God of War Ragnarok manages to do is basically take the same game, same core mechanics, same ideas, continuation of a story, but make it feel fresh in really inventive ways, without, drastically differing from the original game. Some common examples are the sequel to Ori, Jak 2, Sly Cooper 2, among others that I'm struggling to think of right now. But I always think, like, why did you mess with this game so much? And that, to me, is why God of War is a truly unique game. It is, first of all, it's the same realms basically, but sometimes let's just take the realm everyone's familiar with, Midgard, and basically taking that, and now what's the term for the winter? I kind of forgot.
Fimbulwinter?
Fimbulwinter has now kind of changed what it looks like. So it's a familiar area, but gameplay wise, it feels completely new. So it's an interesting continuation on the same area, and it's been changed or transformed because of the events of the game. So you get continuity and freshness simultaneously. When we get to gameplay spoilers, the game continues to mix it up in a variety of creative ways. And like most AAA Sony games, specifically Naughty Dog games, where this game excels is creating new characters. All the new characters I loved and were very compelling, not just like from a performance writing standpoint, but more so visually. I visually loved every character, and it has some of the best pacing of any AAA action game I've ever played. I thought the scenarios were always changing. Enemy types were not overused. At least I didn't think so. I was always, some new realm was switching up the enemies. Bosses eventually became common enemies, and they're pulling from all the original enemy types and then adding a bunch of new ones. And when you take that whole mixing pot of potential enemy configurations, it was constantly making it interesting as far as I'm concerned. So I thought, and visual pacing is the last thing I'll say. I thought every area had such a distinct visual look, and similar to how I felt when I was playing Dragon Age. What was the one next gen or the
Inquisition?
PS4? Inquisition, yeah. BioWare's really good at like, oh, I've never seen an area like this in a game before. I thought this game was really good at inventing new visual ideas and environment ideas that I have not seen in other games. Most games I play, I go to a new area, I'm like, I've seen something like this before. There were visual ideas that were completely fresh to me, which is so hard to do now. So I think that is what makes this game fantastic, on top of all the things that made the original great. So I love this game. What did you guys think about it?
Well, let me follow up on kind of what you were saying, like comparing it to the previous game and does it change enough and stuff like that. So, I mean, overall, I also thought the game was fantastic. But it's weird because, I mean, I don't know if anyone remembers our discussions about the 2018 God of War, but I almost feel like, from what I remember anyway, like a little bit hypocritical here, because I remember saying the 2018 God of War, I really liked it, but it was just building on, the previous trilogy and everything that had already been there for God of War, just giving it a new twist. And now I'm kind of like, this one changes less and builds less than the 2018 one did. And yet I'm kind of feeling like I don't want it to change. I'm happy with that. And so I don't know. I'm not sure why that is, like in terms of, I don't know. In a way, it did make me appreciate the 2018 one more, but I think it does just build on that one. And like you said, more like compelling characters, storylines, narrative. Like it's a long game, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. But like, I actually really got pulled into the story. I know, like Frank, you're always kind of like, who cares about story in video games? And Huck, you're skipping cutscenes where you can, which I understand. And sometimes I do feel that way about certain games, but this one I actually did care and wanted to watch all the cutscenes and was kind of into it. So all of that stuff, plus some of the gameplay things they've added, it just, I loved it. And there is a bit of a, as you mentioned with Elden Ring, there's sort of like this divide I find in the gaming community. And maybe like the big thing really is just the divide between open world versus linear games. Like what do people prefer? And, in some ways it feels a bit old fashioned because of how linear it is. It does have some open sections, but I kind of like it still. I like that about it. So
I do too. I think they're actually pretty similar. And even where I thought Elden Ring would win Game of the Year because it's taking From Software to open world and just coming up with some new design ideas, which I think are good, but it's not really inventing new gameplay. It plays very similar to Dark Souls and Sekiro at some level. So I don't necessarily understand why the same criticisms and concerns about the same thing that are levied towards God of War are not levied towards all From Software games. It's like, how do we kind of bring new life to a core set of mechanics that people are pretty familiar with? And I think they both do tremendous jobs of bringing new life to pre-existing mechanics and systems.
I gotta jump in and say, I am the skipping cinematics thing. That is a life hack. Okay. I watch the cinematics. I just watch them on YouTube at 2x speed so that I get half of my time back. Okay. That's a life hack.
Cool. That's a pretty good life hack.
That's how I maximize my gameplay time. But I
might even change it. Like for Neon White, I should have taken your idea and skipped them all. And then when I took a dump or something, just watch them all.
Yes. See, that is
really maximize time.
That's a next gen life hack right there on cinematics for sure. I must say, I also really enjoyed the game. I did find that I was kind of a little sad how I had to play the game. Not that I had to play it this way, but the way that I kind of rushed through it at the end, because I was actually really enjoying the side content and felt that like a few of the side quest parts were really, really strong. And I actually really enjoyed what they brought and the gameplay ideas. I mean, there wasn't a vast difference in the gameplay, but just the environments you'd explore, the characters you'd interact with. I was like, I'm really enjoying all this stuff. I can't believe this, 2-hour jaunt is a side quest that's extra. And just, I did though run into some problems personally with the cinematic lengths in certain spots where I felt like they dragged on a little long. I kind of got to the point like, okay, let's just get back into the game now. That would be like a pretty minor critique. My other critique that I was saying to you guys in text was that this game would probably suffer on a replay because I can't skip the cinematics. So some of these longer cinematics would be kind of, a slog to get through if you were playing the game just because you wanted to play through it again and experience the gameplay again and all the exploring. The exploring was really strong. I think I mentioned on a show, probably 2 months ago, how I wasn't finding any of the like hanging buckets and stuff in the environment, but literally like the next time I logged into play, I got to a new area and they were all over the place. So that was totally unfounded on my part. And also, like Frank, you were mentioning with the new environments and stuff, I really liked how they added like quote unquote new hanging baskets to the areas, which I didn't even really discover until kind of like partway through. Like I saw that these things were shining. I was like, how do I even, like, what do I do with these things? And I didn't discover it till quite a bit later. And I thought that was a pretty nifty way to, basically have the same mechanic, but just kind of tweak it a little bit. And I think that is what this game does really good. Like you were saying, is like it takes that core and just like tweaks it ever so slightly, tries to improve here and there. But overall, really, really enjoyed it. And I would like to go back, but, I don't have that much time right now. So I would like to really, go back and try to 100% it. It's a fun game. I really, even when I was rushing through it, I didn't really feel, sometimes when you rush through a game just to try to finish it, you feel like, all right, let's just get this thing done. Like I'm hating every second of this. I just want to roll credits. And like, that's not what I was feeling like with this game. I was more like, oh man, this game, I got like 3 hours left. I mean, that's a long time, but I'm still enjoying it. I would log in and play and then, feel fine. I wouldn't be like hating my life or regretting that I was, going to play this game. So I think, I don't know what they've done that's really different from the first one, though the first one was really good. But this game has a lot of just really good combat, equally paced between exploration and combat rooms. Every combat situation, I never felt like super overwhelmed, though I didn't do any of the extra content. Like I'm sure there's super hard bosses like there were in the first one or whatever, Valkyrie type bosses. But I really enjoyed it all around. And the one thing I don't think we mentioned, but maybe Frank, you touched on it a bit, but the character models are unreal. They are absolutely off the charts, unreal.
Okay, so I agree. There are technically a couple of character models that I was underwhelmed by. but they're few and far between. They're typically some of the less used human models, but everything else, any main character and creature model is out of this world. There are characters that I was like, I love everything about this character. There are bosses and creatures that blew me away. I completely agree that the side quests are excellent. I remember seeing early reviews like the classic. Personally, I like the side quests more than the story, and I roll my eyes like I always do. But I have to say, it's out of any game, it's up there as like side quests are as good as the main quest stuff, and the areas of side quests are really unique and compelling in their own right. They're not just reusing previous areas; they are new areas with their own ideas, which are all really good. And in terms of why, like, taking the original game and not changing that much, they did improve some things that needed improvement. The map is way better. It's much easier to know where you're going to go. There's no spots that get locked off, and backtracking becomes a pain. The compass system of knowing how to get to where you need to go is pretty good, although you don't have it for part of the game. And there was one time where I was a little bit lost, and then I got the compass right after the part where I got lost. But very minor nitpick. And I always complained that combat was not that I wasn't incentivized to use all of the different attacks in the first game, like the 1 second pauses, and understand why those are cool or fun. So they added a system in the menu where if you use moves a certain amount of times, you get like, you level them up basically. And that was a really compelling system for me to actually try. I leveled up every single skill in every single tree.
Especially since you can track how far you've leveled them up. It's really like a smart way to do it.
And you know if you're doing it right, because your number's going up and like, okay, I get it. And that's one of the things that, like Sean said, made me appreciate the first game more. I feel like I would go back having kind of a complete move set and understanding all of the combat mechanics, and I could go back to the first and appreciate that game on an even greater level. So I think it's improved everything except the economies. I still think the crafting economies, the names for things are still, I never grasp or understand the names of crafting components. They're almost level specific out of the 9 levels, and I never associate a name with anything. I don't know what it's actually used for when I get it other than money. And I still think a simplification of the economies would be for the better in this game. There are systems for auto equipping and auto doing that stuff, which to me is an indication that it's not that good of a system. If you can do that, if you can just like do a quick calculation and give you all the best stuff, is it really that compelling a system to begin with? So that is has always been my biggest criticism with this God of War series, but it is so minor that it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the game. It's something I look at as, wow, if this was simple and understandable, it would be one of the best games ever. Like if they nailed that economy system and crafting system the way, like, I feel like the original Horizon did this. It was very simple. You knew exactly what weapons you could get or should get, or when it was good to save for something versus invest in something else. That's the only, like, even close to a major criticism I have of this game.
Yeah, I think it's improved from the first game, but like you said, with the upgrades, not necessarily the crafting was okay. Like, I think it kind of describes the stuff, though it is a little confusing because like a certain thing could be used for, it says like low level shields. Okay, well, what's really a low level shield? What are we talking about here? Like, one should be more explicit so I could say, like, is this like level 2, level 3, level 4 shields, whatever. But for I think what makes it a little more complicated is you have like armor sets, a whole bunch of different armor sets, and each of those armor sets can have augments in them. And so you have these armor sets that are all unique with all unique stats, and then you have these augments with all unique stats So now you have this like crazy combination of stat variation that you're trying to keep in your head, and if it was a little more straightforward where, okay, this is your cold armor set, this is your fire armor set, this is your lightning resistant armor set, whatever. If it was very obvious what each armor set did, and then you could maximize the augment for those, I think it would be a much more straightforward. Whereas like, I don't know, I crafted every armor set and kept trying to get them all. And I only ever used maybe 4, I think. And that was only because like when I got one that was obviously way better, I would just pick that. So I had, I don't know how many there are, 10 or 12 or something. I had a
Ironically,
bunch.
a much more complicated game, Elden Ring, has a much simpler weapon and crafting system of how you invest in things.
Interesting.
And you actually reminded me of my biggest actual criticism of the game in terms of everything we've talked about. It continues from the first game. And then the one thing it completely or almost completely reinvents is the flow of the menus for upgrading, where it's like the D-pad to expand outwards and contract in. Do you know what I'm talking about? How like as you go deeper, you push the D-pad left and right to go inwards when you're upgrading things. Like it was already complicated. They made it a different version of complicated compared to the other menus.
I definitely remember multiple times like exiting out of the entire menu when I didn't mean to do that, and then having to go back in again, and it was kind of frustrating. But yeah, I mean, overall, I agree with you guys on the upgrades thing. Like this was something we definitely talked about with the original 2018 God of War. They've added more stuff. And like you said, so I think there is incentive in some cases to use more moves, to switch weapons more often. There's more variety in enemies and things like that to force you to do that. But I just, the upgrades are weird. There's certain things where it's like XP unlocks skills, but then there is XP that goes into other things as well that I didn't realize until later in the game.
Skills or whatever they are.
Yeah. And then, you've got like each weapon has upgrade things you can put into it. You've got companion stuff in some cases. It's like, it's so much.
Even the XP system's fine. I get that, like how you invest in skills and runic attacks, but it's more the armor and weapons and customization options. Because I will say by the end of the game, by the time I was getting close to 100%ing it, because you start to get a lot of these economies and one of the challenges in the extra content, that's when I finally got it. That is a design failure. If I don't get your systems until I've used them for 40 hours, that is not a well-designed system.
Well, yeah. And that's the other thing too, is it's like, ultimately, does this take away from my enjoyment of the game? Not too much. A lot of times I think, well, maybe this is for people who are playing at, higher difficulty levels. You're going back and now you really have to care about where you're upgrading and stuff like that. Whereas I kind of just found a couple things I liked and just kept upgrading those. And that seemed to work okay for me. I don't know if do you guys have, I don't know, maybe this is spoilerish, but maybe we can talk about like the armor that we use. Cause I'm kind of curious. There was a few that I had read about that were supposed to be really good. And I went out of my way to try and get those. And then I found that the one I was already using was better and I preferred it. And I just kept using that. So,
I mean, that's how the armors are designed, right? It's like small stat tweaks based on your play style. And then you can maybe invest in an armor set that caters to you at some level. But ultimately, I just kind of picked whatever new good one I got and invested some stats in there. I really don't think about which one suits my playstyle better. And I do agree with Sean. It's there for people who play at higher difficulty levels or are really into the game, but too confusing for people who aren't into that.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to tell you which ones I use. Like, I think I used one that was called Dragon something at one point, and I don't know. I think I used an ice one, and that's about as far as I remember the armor sets. The particular armor sets anyways.
Yeah, there was one that I saw a lot of people saying is great. And I think it's more like there's one that like adds poison when you block or parry or something.
That might be just a wand for one of the shields, though, isn't it? Like,
no, there was an armor set for that as well, and I mean, I just didn't parry that much, so it wasn't really that beneficial to me. But that's another thing where like the parry, in some games is absolutely crucial. I kind of remember it being pretty important in the last game. In this one, they have some options for you if you're not as into that, and like you said, some of the shield upgrades and stuff. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know what works with which shields, but the one I had, there's like that shield break or shield block thing where they flash blue, which I used quite a bit, and that actually
every shield has a shield block that like you tweak what the double attack does.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that, and
I love that. And like the telegraph, the blue telegraph for those, although it's pretty forgiving. If anything, I feel like they tweaked the forgiveness of the timings of parrying in a good way. Like I felt I was parrying much more frequently. I felt powerful. I had precision, like maybe precision because I suck, but I felt like I could do it when I wanted to. And it made it really rewarding.
Yeah.
You should really I think this game does parrying the best of any game I've played in the recent past anyways. I feel like I think it's forgiving, but it doesn't feel like it's forgiving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you can just spam it and cheese the system.
Yeah. And it also feels like when you get it, you like earned it, even though I think there's, probably a little leeway on each side where like, they kind of let you get away with some stuff. But I must say some of the going back to like the economy and the crafting, I must say that this sort of crafting system, if like I'm not a crafting guy, and this is a crafting system I can get behind because it's pretty simple. Now, I say that with a caveat that it doesn't really make sense, like you were saying. But
that's my biggest criticism. I don't think it's good for people who are into crafting, and it's also not good for people who aren't into crafting. Yeah. So it's like a happy medium that satisfies no one.
I guess so. I would prefer this over a super complicated one though, because I hate like scouring the world for some stupid, like, I don't know, mint leaf or whatever I need to try to like create this thing, or the case where like they don't even give you the recipe and you're like got to figure it out on your own and you're wasting your ingredients, and then you're like, fuck, now I got to go find more of this shit. And like I hate crafting systems like that.
Well, then what you need to play is Sekiro. Now I know it's hard, but Sekiro has the most satisfying parry and counter system of any game ever. It's ruined combat for me in all games. And it is like pre-assigned, very limited leveling, and you get just attacks and weapons at very determined points in the game. It needs to be played by everyone who can handle its difficulty. It is amazing.
I did play it a bit at your house at one time. Yeah. I think we were recording Film Junk, I don't know, 9,000 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great game. And perhaps if I went back and played it, I'd be like, Sekiro owns all these games. It's been a while. I need to play through it again. I honestly don't have much else stuff that isn't story or gameplay spoiler. I guess I'll say one thing I can veil as non-spoiler. One of the realms has plants, stationary plants, and they are not easy to see. They're not fun. That realm is the only dip in the game. It is a shitty. Everything about it sucks. And Huck, you had said on a previous episode that you didn't mind them that much. I talked to a friend of mine. He was exactly on the same page. They are horse shit.
So what I found, they had very obvious audio tells. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't sprinting. I just wouldn't. Well, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. See, this is what I was going to bring up. I didn't mind it either, but it's designed for people who are like a bull in a china shop playing the game, just running through.
Yeah, if you're sprinting through that area, you're gonna get
which
punished.
Is fine, but you can't just all of a sudden decide to do that. I've played through 40 hours of a previous game. 10 hours of this one, and now you completely change how I have to walk through areas.
Well, I thought they introduced it pretty well, though, that there was going to be the plants right at the beginning of that area.
Yeah, but it's the style of gameplay. Like now I'm cautious. First of all, if that's the case, they're poorly designed because they're never that. If they killed you instantly, that would create a vibe for that area, or like they were super punishing, where I'm like, okay, I have to be careful. If I was trying to get the idea that this area is very dangerous and it's a theme for that area, I would get it, but it's not. I run into them. They spray me with stuff. I ignore it.
What do you mean it's not a theme? Wait, what do you mean it's not a theme for that area? That whole area is about plants.
No, I mean a gameplay theme, like a high tension area, because I still just run through it anyway. They hit me, I survive. It's not like I don't get my health back immediately. They're not punishing enough to make you care to look for them. They're unbalanced design wise. They don't make sense.
I disagree.
I just feel like it's another thing to motivate you to use ranged attacks more often, because you kind of have to see them from a distance and take them out.
And you have to pay attention to the environment and like look for stuff. I don't know. I liked them. I thought it was good. Agree to disagree. Next thing, this guy's going to start complaining that the stealth sections in Breath of the Wild are shit or something. Like, come on.
Well, so
not gonna lie.
we were kind of talking about difficulty already, but I'm curious if you guys. I felt like this was a little like playing on normal. And I played the 2018 version on normal. I felt like this was a bit easier overall. Like I even boss fights, it didn't die that many times. I'm not sure if I just kind of lucked out and, had a build that really worked for me, or if that was like a conscious thing. But what did you guys think?
I would agree with that. I also think that the boss fight checkpoint system is very lenient.
Yes, which I was a big fan of.
Yeah. So I mean, you can, if they have like a boss with 3 phases or whatever, if you get to phase 2 and you die, you're starting at phase 2. You don't have to do the whole thing again, which is really, really lenient normally. Like that's pretty unheard of in games, actually. Like usually they punish you on a boss and make you do the whole thing again and learn it, but not in this game. They, even some of the final bosses, they have large phases and you could die at the last one and be right back at the start of that last one. So
I'm curious if that checkpoint system is altered on the different difficulty levels. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing it is, but I don't know officially. That would be my major criticism with the difficulty. It's fine in the base game. When you do end level, like the equivalent of Valkyries in the first game in this game, and the last hardest boss fight in the game are ridiculously hard. I had to put them down to the simplest difficulty level, and even then I died. I've played this game for 40 hours. If I switch to the easiest story, you want story difficulty, and I still can't do it, that's broken. That is not. Imagine someone who actually is playing for story that wants to do that. They will not be able to. And it's not just a matter of oh, Frank, get good at the game. I was pretty good at the game. There are times where you have to fight 2 bosses at once, and it's kind of RNG punishing. And I would get to 75% without getting hit. And then there's a ramp up in how they start to do their attacks. I could always get them down to 75% without even getting touched, basically. And then the game just ramps up and kills me in 3 seconds. And I'm like, this is just a waste of time. Where I'm like, the trivial part I can do no matter what to get to the hard part, which is frustratingly hard. So there are certainly balancing issues with the extra content, in my opinion.
Well, so are you're talking about the Draugr holes or whatever? Is that what?
No, those are a joke.
No. Okay, no, I was going to say playing through initially, I found them pretty hard, but
there's a couple pretty hard ones, yeah.
But they were orange or purple or whatever. So I was like, I guess I should come back later for this stuff. But I mean, I think that's the equivalent of Valkyries, right? Is it not? Or is there other stuff?
No, there are other the tombstones,
the gravestones. Oh yeah, with the key
that are green are all mini boss.
Oh right, okay, yeah, I remember those.
And then even a couple of those.
There's 12 of them, I think, or 13. And then there's another set of bosses in extra game content that are amazing, that are kind of rehashes from the first game. And then there's also a major, like, other end game boss fight that is super cool, but very hard. There's just lots of extra stuff in this game. It's impressive.
And what about those like little portal things? Sometimes I had trouble with some of those portal things that you like reach in, and sometimes you get an item, and sometimes you fight some people.
Isn't that what you're talking about, or is that another set of things?
That's another
rifts or whatever.
Yeah, that's another set of things.
Wow,
there's lots of things.
A lot of stuff.
There is.
But yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing.
Like the simple puzzle, like in terms of adding, they didn't add that many new collectibles. Like it's the urn puzzles, which are still good. They add new mechanics for that. But the enemies that you have to hit from behind or at an angle where they can't see you is a really simple puzzle collectible thing. It's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, in terms of comparing this to like an open world game, like, again, there's sections where you can kind of choose where you're going. And even if you, as you're playing through the main quest, there's sections where they'll be like, okay, do you want to go do some other stuff? And like, you can look at the different realms and see maybe you have some side quests going in the different realms. But none of it feels like fetch quest type stuff. There's nothing in this game that's just kind of like you guys were talking about, like gathering resources and stuff. I mean, I guess there are some items that you do need to farm for armor and things like that, but like, it's not, I don't know. It just never feels like an open world game, even when it does have more exploration options available to you, which maybe for some people is bad, but I think it's good.
There are 2 open world areas maybe 3 that I loved. Yeah, 3 for sure, maybe 4. The desert was awesome. The lake was fantastic. The plains are excellent, and a sub part of the plains, I think the jungle, or I think it's called, was also amazing. And that's all basically extra content for the most part.
Yeah. Like that stuff is some of the stuff that I was enjoying the most. And that's where I was kind of doing some of that stuff. And then after a while, I was like, wow, this is like taking me a lot longer than I thought for this one side quest. Like I got to finish this game. So I had to leave it behind, but I was really enjoying it. So it's kind of like, again, how we're playing it is maybe not the best way, but
I think in terms of like not rushing it, I was trying to do the quests. I would do some side quest stuff. I'd bounce back and forth, and I hit a perfect sweet spot, I'd say, where by the time I was done the game, I went to do cleanup, and it was like maybe 10 hours of stuff. Like it wasn't a chore. I had done enough of it while I was playing that it felt perfect to me.
Yeah, I think
I loved getting 100% in this game.
Well, that's cool. That's good to hear. I was going to ask just in general, like, because sometimes platining a game, like it's a chore, right? But
Ghost of Tsushima is a classic example, right?
Yeah, which I mean, yeah, it is more of a classic open world type game, I think, with side content that isn't always as solid. But yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the length of the game, again, I feel like some of the early main quest stuff is just there's long chapters, like that's the one thing that kind of got me, is like you feel like, okay, at the end of a chapter I can kind of break off, do something else if I want, or that's just a good point to like put it down for the night or whatever. But those sections are just really long initially, which I think just for anyone just trying to play the game, like it feels like this really long game because of that stuff. Like I wish some of those things maybe were broken up a little bit.
I completely agree. And in particular, 1 or 2 sections that I'll save for spoiler dragged quite a bit. And they took what were like amazing visual novel things and made me like get sick of them by the end.
Yeah. And I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah, like I found towards the end, things were moving faster, and it's good because like you were saying, Huck, you don't want to be at the end of a game just feeling like, oh, I just want to get to the end, like hurry up. And there's a couple moments, couple cutscenes where things are drawn out a little bit, but like, and then maybe the difficulty of this is where it helps a bit, where it's like you're kind of rolling with it, and the momentum of like getting to the end of the game, you're not doing boss fights like 20 times. Like you're just rolling through it and keeping going with the story. And I prefer that personally. Like I get, the debate over like boss fights, should they be challenging or not? But like something that's when you're into the story and you just want to keep going and see where that's headed, it's kind of nice.
And one thing I'll say, which is a criticism or was a criticism for Forbidden West, obvious telegraphs. Like there's no reason why there should be a symbol on rocks that you can climb, but I don't care. They're there, and it makes playing the game very easy. I don't care if it's believable or not, or if I'm climbing where I want, when I want. It makes it fun to play. Take note.
Yeah, it's not a game where you can climb anywhere, but you can climb in a lot of places, and I think they have a good balance there for that stuff.
Before we move on to the gameplay spoilers, I just want to say I don't think this is a spoiler, but I thought the dog sled was a fine mechanic, a nice way to get around some of the bigger areas. The canoe or the boat or whatever you want to call it, it could be like a little slow at times. So it was kind of like a nice change of pace, the dog sled. I also like how they incorporated, I don't know, this may be a bit of gameplay spoilers, but they incorporated the dogs into some of the gameplay they like use their noses to try to sniff out certain clues kind of thing. I kind of like that. I thought that was a neat way to sort of...
Wolves?
Wolves?
Is it wolves?
Dogs? Yeah. Yeah, they use... But, that was a neat way to incorporate that vehicle or whatever you want to call it into gameplay. I also thought that one thing we haven't touched on at all, or maybe I'll wait for that, but the level design I thought was great. I thought the way they also reused the level design, where like you would come back to an area and, you might re-explore an area you've already explored, but it didn't really feel like it was out of place or anything like that. And just the sheer size of this game is very impressive. I think it took 3 years or something. And it feels like it should have taken way longer than that. Like there's so much stuff in this game, and it's not just like, okay, let's just throw up some, random walls and have you walk down a corridor. There's like a lot of attention to detail put into these environments, and, how everything loops back on each other so that, you go in one way, you do a bunch of stuff, and then you come out and it's all this nice little thing where you can return if you want to later on in the game. And I thought they really took their time and obviously, did it right. I think I already mentioned it, but I love being able to find things in the environment. There's like using, I guess that's gameplay spoilers. I'll say that. And the last thing I want to touch on, which we haven't talked about, is the audio design is really, really good. The music's really good. All the sound effects are really good. I know Frank's listened to his podcast, so he missed half of the audio stuff, but like all the little, like, the plant sounds that alert you that you're near a hazardous plant, those are all great.
Probably the best plant sounds in a game.
At least.
Everyone's talking about it.
Everybody. Yeah. So, but like, the classic God of War sort of like Viking choir they use in the soundtrack, and how they smartly use it in the game to emphasize like key moments in the gameplay really is awesome, I think. And it really like drives home that, God of War, Greek mythology sort of, gameplay that, or story that they're trying to tell. I
agree. The score is excellent.
Yeah.
It's really well done.
Yeah. I got a little side note on the score. So I queued up a quick clip of one of the songs. Now, I don't know, Frank, you may not have had the volume turned up. I don't know if you heard this, but just tell me if this reminds you of anything, okay? Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Like, like this song kind of goes off from there, and I don't know if it ever repeats that exact progression of notes, but like it's very Halo, very strange.
Where was
Very.
that? Where was that used? I don't recall hearing that in the game.
The track is called Remembering Faye. So I think it's like one of the flashbacks.
Okay.
But yeah, strange, but such a well-known theme song. You would think somebody would be like, hey, that's a little similar, but unless Halo is drawing from some other thing that I don't know about, which could be maybe, but
Awesome.
anyway, but yeah, I do really like the score, and it definitely builds, and towards the end of the game is fantastic. So okay, a couple other quick things maybe before we get into spoilers. Just minor complaints, things I was thinking about. So this is I'm pretty sure this was kind of an issue in the first game as well, but the way that like you move, and obviously they switched to sort of the over the shoulder thing for the 2018 God of War. There is a weird thing with boss fights, I find, where it wants to lock you in to face the boss all the time. So sometimes you want to run to pick up health or something. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it's like a struggle. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like you're trying to like move this way, but it keeps wanting you to like lock onto the boss. I mean, I think it's just a result of that over the shoulder thing. But I don't know. It definitely annoyed me a couple times in the game.
I didn't have that. I did have typical lock-on issues with bosses that teleport, or when there's multiple bosses, but I don't think any game's ever done that well.
Yeah, true. I did have, I don't know if I talked about this. I did have at least one soft lock.
I did as well.
Which I was,
that's the only bug I encountered the entire.
Yeah, and you guys were talking about just like the size of the game and how long it took to make, and it's like it is impressive that it's sort of as good as it looks, as big as it is, and as stable as it is. But I had one where it was like one of those cave painting sequences, and then I tried to leave, and there was like an invisible barrier. I couldn't leave. I had to reload. But I guess not too much else to say that's not spoilery. Oh, should we touch on the hint system? Like we kind of talked about that.
That's my other criticism, which is a lot of people's criticism.
Yeah, and that certainly I've seen a ton of people that I think played the first couple hours and had a couple of those moments where it's like you just got to a puzzle and 10 seconds later they're telling you the answer to the puzzle and you've barely even had time to think about it, which is annoying. But there is a setting in this, I can't remember what menu it is, and I did turn that off. And
I did too, and I still got them.
You do still get them from time to time, but I feel like it reduced it. I don't totally know.
I went looking for that. I could
too frequently, and it wasn't just about puzzles either. I feel like story wise, there were moments where if you like, I'm always kind of panning my camera, exploring an area. Like I'm not, when people do gameplay demos at E3 or whatever, and they're like super slow and that's not how I play games. I'm like looking all over the place. I'm not doing an ideal playthrough. And I think there was a system where if you just panned over something, the side character would often say, "Oh, look at that," or "Hey," they would comment on something. Like, I'm not even looking at it. I don't know what you're talking about at all. I have no context for this stuff. So, in addition to that, just generally too much talking from companions. This seems to be a common theme with Guardians of the Galaxy in this. Just a little less talking, please. I'm playing a game. I do not need to be bombarded with story and half-assed dialogue when I play games.
Yeah, I mean, like the writing and the voice performances are great, but there are sections of the game that feel like they're just there for you to run through and get this dialogue. So you're kind of given something to do, but not much. And it's mostly just dialogue going. And I feel like some of that stuff maybe could have been cut. I don't remember exactly what they all are, but yeah.
I'm sure we'll bring up two sections that I agree with regards to that.
I almost feel like it's like that for when you're in that like tree loading circle between the realms. Like I almost feel like that is just there. It's like the driving in the car in GTA 5, where it's like just there to like play this audio track long enough and then they load it up. Because I mean, the PS5 can load this stuff. Like, think of how quick you get into the game. When you start up a fresh version, you hit continue. It is not very long, couple seconds. You're telling me that once you're in the game and you're in this loading circle, you got to wait 2 minutes? No, you don't. Like, this is here simply to get this story point across. Because
I guess I didn't think it was that way. I did think it was, I give it a pass because it's better than a loading screen. But I guess I know what you're saying. Like, it could be up for debate if it's actually using all of that time to load. I think it is. And perhaps when they load in initially, maybe they're caching or preloading based on your last save to make it seem faster. But
I don't know. The PS5 SSD is super fast. I mean, look at Spider-Man. Like,
yeah,
it's Tsushima's the gold standard for like loading on teleporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting point. I'm wondering, like, I mean, so this is available on PS4 as well, right? Ragnarok. Yeah. So I don't know if like that could be a factor where like I mean, it was in the original 2018 game, right? So
yeah, I think you're right.
Maybe that's just a holdover, and they're like, well, we got to do something for the PS4. And then they wrote this dialogue, and it's like, well, can't not have them hear the dialogue. I don't know, but there's definitely moments where you can hit the button to go through the door before the dialogue even finishes. Like, you kind of get there and you're already like going through the door before you even see the door or something. It's kind of weird.
So do you guys actually walk around in that tree area? I literally just stand there and wait for the door to appear in front of me, and then I just walk out.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
I
Yeah,
guess I do
walk,
half and half. I mix it up. But I'm glad Sean brought that up because it is worth saying. I played the PS4 version on PS5 and it was perfect. Like, I had no issues at all. It was fantastic. So I can't vouch for playing it on an original, like non-pro PS4, but the actual version, the PS4 version was fantastic.
Did you notice any like fidelity difference at all?
I did. I really didn't.
But did you play the PS5 version at some point to compare or no?
Just auto pop that baby.
Okay. I mean,
I looked at some videos comparing them and I really couldn't tell much of a difference.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you know what, if there is a huge difference and you can tell, I'm glad I can't. It makes me like I'm not like torturing myself. I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. I'm not a huge like ray casting and shadow. I don't even pick up on half of that stuff. I do pick up on frame rate differences. Like that can be a big deal, but visual quality, not a huge deal to me.
Okay.
And my experience was smooth.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean,
fuck.
I think that's it for non-spoiler stuff for me. What about you guys?
Should we give a star rating now before we get into spoiler?
Yeah, we could do that.
Let's do it.
An easy 5 for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 5 for me. I think I gave the last one a 4.5. So, I mean, I'm curious if you guys think this is better than the 2018 version as well.
I think the game is better. I think I like the story in the first one better, but as a game, it is a better game.
And I'm going to give it a 5 too. Unanimous. So, very good game.
I still have to decide if it is where it is in the top 3 or 4 on my list. I am going back and forth. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy at all. I know it'll be Sean's number one. I think it has to be Huck's number one, but we'll see.
Okay.
We will see, won't we?
All right, let's get into gameplay spoilers for God of War Ragnarok. If you don't want to know anything about twists or variations on gameplay, please tune out now.
I guess we should say this could involve, I don't know how to phrase this, because like this isn't going to be story stuff we're talking about, but we might talk about characters or
combat, major changes to gameplay.
Are we going to talk boss fights?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that could also be part of this.
So get ready. This is officially spoiler territory. Listen at your own risk. So the biggest spoiler thing, especially comparing it to the original, getting the Blades of Chaos in the 2018 God of War was the best twist / gameplay mix up of any game ever. I didn't know about it. It made sense for the story, and it completely revitalized the gameplay. Now, I wouldn't say it's the same version of that in this game, but the new weapon is the spear. And while I was initially underwhelmed, and I don't think it's like story-wise or gameplay-wise as impactful as the Blades of Chaos in the first game, I ended up really liking it by the end. I had a lot of fun when I was leveling up that tree, and even some stuff initially, like there's a blast mechanic where it just like does a wave blast. I'm like, I didn't even know what it was doing at first. I actually started to use it a lot more, and the like multiple impaling of spears and using them to interact with the environment, which is what I think Huck was going to allude to earlier in the review. I thought the spear was great, and the moveset was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was kind of pleasantly surprised with it as well. Like it's faster, so it's kind of like I really liked the axe in the first game. Like even when you got the Blades of Chaos, I still like used the axe a lot. And this game, I mean, I don't know if they changed it that much, but like you definitely feel the weight of the axe in this one, where when you switch to the spear or even the blades, you're kind of moving around faster. And so there's definitely situations where you want it. I mean, there's certain boss fights where you have to use the spear. But yeah, I was a big fan of it as well.
I want to reiterate one thing based on that you said earlier, and I already said, I don't think any game in history, a sequel, has ever made me like the original more and want to go back and play the original again. It's usually like, it makes me long for the original. Like, I wish they wouldn't have screwed this game up, or, if I was going to play these again, I'd just play the original, which is what happens very often. This one made me appreciate the first one in ways I never did. So I think that's a pretty strong endorsement for Ragnarok.
Yeah, I really like the spear too. I found that I started off using it primarily as like a ranged weapon, and then using so you could throw it like 5 times, I think, and then hit triangle, I think, and then it'll explode, and it kind of does a little additional damage. And I was primarily using it just as that, but when I kind of got later in the game, I started using it as just like a melee weapon as well, and it was actually pretty good as a melee weapon in general. So I liked it. I did find that I would default to the Blades of Chaos most of the time. I started finding, especially in the later game, that the axe, for the slowness, didn't do enough damage. So I appreciated the speed of the Blades of Chaos over it, and also its range. So I found that was more my weapon of choice, especially down the stretch.
They throw a lot of enemies at you that
the frost
like ice
or whatever
themed. Yeah.
So. I thought the game could actually do more of that. I enjoyed, because I don't think it's great at making me want to use status effects. When Sean was talking about the poison armor, I meant to bring this up, where using the stat effects, it takes so long to build up on enemies and big enemies in particular that I'm never motivated to use certain status effects or fire or ice as a combat strategy against enemies. But when I had to use them against certain barriers or armor, I really enjoyed it. And I would say after I'd leveled up all 3 skill trees, I still actually switched pretty evenly across the weapons. Having leveled each one up made me appreciate each weapon in its own right, which I think is really hard to do with 3 core weapons in a game.
Now, were you mainly doing the weapon swapping to get the masteries or whatever the level?
No, even once I was done that, I would still swap between them and like enjoy just for fun. Like just, I haven't used this weapon in a while. I want to use it.
Yeah.
You just reminded me there's like those, you can add certain attributes to the weapons and armor too, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like
when you level
strength, once you master it. Yeah.
But like, no, even before that, isn't there? Maybe not. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of extra stuff that I didn't fully
There's a lot of runic attacks, which I guess.
But there's just like, I remember there's things where you could like modify something and you could like switch between all these different attributes. And I was like, I don't know what
I think that's just like the handles and palms, I think they call them, which were in the first game as well, like to tweak stats on weapons.
Okay. I just like, it was weird because usually you get something that has a certain attribute, but there were specific things where you could choose the attribute. And I was like, I have no idea which one.
Not on weapons. Weapons are what they are. The way you tweak the attributes is with the like.
It might be like amulets or something.
I think you're thinking, Sean, I think you're thinking of the moves themselves. Like you would upgrade a move and then it would let you craft like three options. You could choose like, so in like a damage situation, you could pick to boost the damage, boost the stun, or boost something
like
else.
In the skill tree, right?
That's for the skill tree.
No, that's in the skill tree. When you would master a move,
yeah, okay,
you'd be able to craft like a bonus.
Yeah, which varied. It wasn't even always the same.
Yeah, it wasn't always the same.
It could be element, strength, knockback, stun, and some other stuff. So there's a lot of tweaking with that stuff, which I generally kind of liked. I wouldn't say I noticed a huge difference once I'd mastered it. It just was a compelling thing to do. But, the weapons are one of the key pacing ideas. And since we're talking about what you can level up and what you can change, I think we should start getting into the fact that you play as different characters and have different characters as companions, which is also like the biggest way the game creates variety and mixes things up. Like you're playing with Kratos. Yeah. Now you play with Atreus, which is a similar combat moveset, but slightly different and just a nice change up. And specifically the runic attacks where you turn into animals and bears. I wouldn't say they're necessarily that much fun to control, but they're cool. They're visually fun. And if you had to play the whole game like that, I don't think it'd be great, but they're still neat and a nice switch up.
So there was one runic attack with Atreus that I never figured out how to do. And I would always see it in like the preview. And it was the one where you could like spawn in almost like ghost animals to fight alongside you. And I could never figure out how to trigger that. So there was like one where like
ghost animals, dude.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to use those. I don't know. So I think the game,
the R2 runic attack, the equivalent of that.
Oh, really? I don't know. I couldn't figure it out for whatever reason. I don't know. I thought they could have done a better job maybe introducing that to you when you get it. It seems like they never actually tell you how to do that necessarily. I don't know.
The rage meter for Atreus is you actually turn into an animal, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah. That I would get. But then there was like those other moves. Anyways, I guess I just didn't read it closely enough to figure out what buttons to press or whatever. But I thought they could have done a better job of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you, although there wasn't specific stuff that I couldn't figure out. There's a lot of stuff I was just ignoring altogether. So, but I mean, the playing as Atreus is great. I mean, that's I think one of the big things they do to sort of like add to the game, and it also adds to the story, because now you're playing chapters where you're playing as him and Kratos isn't anywhere around, and so you're getting his perspective on things. And obviously it's very much like a father-son story, which we'll get more into, but that was great. And then like having Freya as a companion in some cases. Sometimes you have either Brock.
Angrboda. Thor is like pulling you.
Oh yeah, right. There's like a lot of different people. Yeah,
it's Angrboda. Now that is the section that goes on too long in Jotunheim. I think that's the section we would all say is generally too long, which sucks, because when you first get to that area, I was like visually like enthralled. So one, I love the character of Angrboda. Like, I think she looks awesome. That model is like really detailed and expressive. And then the creature you ride is really cool looking. And sorry, with Angrboda as well, her companion attack of the colored paint, I thought visually was amazing. Yeah, I think on the Discord, when I got to that part, I put like a GIF of just rainbow dust exploding everywhere to allude that I was at that part. And it was amazing. It looks so good. I mean, there's another like rainbow color element in I think it's Elfheim. Yeah, Alpha, where all the walls are like this reflective rainbow diffraction material, and it looks amazing. This game really leans into color. Not that the first game doesn't, but this one even more so, and like vibrant colors, almost in a Guardians of the Galaxy way. And I loved that stuff. Like visually, the color palette and variety of the color palette is amazing.
Yeah, it almost seemed like in the what's her name, Angrboda? Like in her world too, it almost looked like there was like a little bit of a haze, like, so you didn't really know if this was like a dream world or whatnot, like, because it wasn't really clear. Because doesn't Atreus, I mean, this tiny spoiler for story, but doesn't he like fall asleep and then he wakes up in her?
Well, I think it's from going through one of those murals, right? Like the behind the murals, and then
is that what happens? Okay,
when he gets taken away, I think. Or maybe she comes and gets him from the tree. You might be right. It's been a while for me.
Yeah. But like, I was surprised she didn't return again as a companion. You only got her as a companion one time. She does return to the story occasionally to just kind of like pop in and say, hi. But I was surprised that she never actually became a companion a second time. It was just in that one stage. And yeah, I was kind of excited to play, I guess, with her some more, and you never get to, which was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted more of that character, and I'm curious to see if they would make that character playable and use those like colored paint explosions or whatever. Like I could see some fun ideas there, and even in the next game, if you play as Freya as well, could be a fun companion.
Yeah, even the other companions like Freya and Thor, you really play with them very minimally, and they kind of just change up the flavor just a little bit. I mean, the gameplay, you'd probably never even know if you like put in Atreus or put in Kratos or whoever in that role, you probably wouldn't even notice the difference. But just the fact that they have different like vocal cues and a different sort of like atmosphere around them does change up the feeling of those areas quite a bit, which is kind of nice.
100%. And just how you get around story wise and somewhat gameplay wise, like the Thor one, he's picking you up, and that the visual way he teleports you is awesome. Like it looks amazing. And I think I mentioned riding that creature with Angrboda is a cool creature. It's not the most fun thing, but I will say any time in this game where I was like, this section could be shorter, and there's a few, usually those sections, at least for me, ended with a really compelling boss fight. I was like, it wrapped up that section and almost made me forget it was dragging by the end. I'm like, oh, that was a cool boss fight. And that boss at the end of Angerboda section I really liked. It felt different. It felt like a totally new kind of God of War boss. It didn't feel like a God of War boss I've played before. I loved that boss. And the area they're in, how it plays with scale, which is a common element of God of War games. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, I really like that as well. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to jump into discussions of boss fights in general, but you know, I would say the one thing, and Huck, I think we were talking about this last week, maybe offline, but like, you know, you think of God of War and it's about like the giant monsters that you're fighting, and like, you know, you're this little guy and they're huge, and that's always been kind of like one of the big defining things of God of War. And in this one, particularly the last couple of boss fights, you know, you don't really get that. But then again, I'm like, maybe they're just trying to like, you know, we've seen so much of that. They're trying to go back and do something unexpected there. I don't know if I still feel like I was a little disappointed in those boss fights to some degree, but I did really like the characters. I don't know if I guess we can say who the final couple of boss fights are.
This is almost a hybrid of story and gameplay. Like who you fight is kind of spoiler. So, did you want to go into your favorite boss? Who you were going to say, Sean?
Okay, well, I mean, Thor and Odin. I mean, we've already been talking a bit about Thor as a companion, but I just really like that version of Thor. I actually, you know, as much as he's just kind of this asshole, like you kind of start to feel for him by the end, obviously, like how he's been treated by his father and stuff like that. But like the actual fight against him and the fight against Odin, they are just humans. You know, like it doesn't, you know, the scale of it.
Is it Heimdall? That's the time, like the freezing time boss. The quote unquote human or human like boss fights are pretty good. And
they're good boss fights.
My favorite boss fights, but they're all really good.
And you know, yeah, I think what it comes down to for me is I just like all the characters. I think that's what makes me really like the boss fights.
Agreed.
But yeah, in terms of like mechanics and memorable moments in them, I don't know if there's that much. I do think the final chapter overall, the feeling of Ragnarok is great. But there are some other big creatures that you fight.
Oh, dude, Garm is one of the best bosses ever. Like the look of it, clearly inspired by Last Guardian to some level. Even the animation specifically, I think, was a nod to that game. There's also, I think, the first time you fight Garm, small, I'm predicting the runaway motion inspired by the way the bald-ass bear runs away in the great outdoors. Very similar. It gets shot with the light bulb or the shotgun lamp. Very similar. I'm going to guess it was used for reference. But I loved the look of Garm. Garm blew my mind. I loved everything about that character in the fight.
So, two things Sean mentioned, the characters. And I must say, I really liked how the characters kept being returned to. So you knew the characters through the whole story. Like Thor's in the beginning, Thor's sprinkled throughout the middle, and then he's at the end. So you know this character well. It's not just some one-off character that you see, you know, maybe for a split second, and then you see when you fight in a boss fight. And even with like a lot of the other characters, like what's the giant you rescue from the prison? Tyr. So Tyr is like, you know, around all the time. The squirrel character is around all the time. And then, you know, Odin and the girl who's Thor's daughter keeps coming back.
Rude.
Yeah, so you keep seeing these characters over and over again. And I think it's nice because, you know, you play as Atreus, you see certain characters, and then you go back to Kratos, you see other characters, and then you kind of go back and forth. So you, just when you're kind of starting to forget about some of them, you return to you return to them, which I think it really works well for this game in terms of, just driving the story and keeping everyone in your head, so you don't forget about them. But for me, in terms of the boss fight gameplay, I was actually quite disappointed in the scale. What Sean was mentioning is I kind of came into this expecting them to really step up in terms of the boss fight. So when I think God of War, I'm thinking God of War 3 with like that Poseidon battle, which is just like epic in scale. And so you have the core gameplay from God of War 2018. So I'm like, okay, how are they going to make these bosses fucking unreal? I'm thinking like that giant snake where you go into its belly in the first one. How are they going to top that? And like just wow moments like that would just scale. And I feel like they didn't really do that. The only two bosses I can think of were like the Garm fight that Frank was talking about it, and that Nidhogg.
Nidhogg is a great
enemy. And even that is not like blow me away wild, right? That's like just like, the boss is big, but really you're just hitting it in its hands. You're not doing anything special. And I find a lot of the bigger, quote unquote, bigger bosses are like that. Okay, I'm just going to punch in the foot a whole bunch of times, and then it's going to fall down, and then I'm going to punch in the face, repeat 3 times. There's nothing crazy about it. You're not like climbing up its back and then stabbing it in a specific area or anything like that. So I had really high hopes. So I was a little let down in the boss department for this game. I thought that I know you were mentioning the human boss fights were good. I thought the Heimdall one was really interesting because it took a little bit of time to figure it out. I thought the Odin one was fine. I thought Thor was fun, but nothing really was like super, super crazy for me.
If I had one minor criticism, the opening of the game and the first time you fight Thor is almost identically recreating the lead up to the Stranger in the first game. It's almost like beat for beat, the same kind of idea, which I was a little more aware of it than other parts of the game, but it was still good. And other boss fight, the first time you fight a Dreki, like that's my jam. Those kinds of creatures. I love the Drekkies, and I was happy to fight them over and over again throughout the course of the game, especially in the extra content. Grilla, we talked about the grandmother was an awesome fight. Garm loved, and I think those are my favorite boss fights in the game. But looking at them, there weren't as many as I thought. I will say Heimdall, initially, I was getting vibes of Skyward Sword. I can't remember the name of the character that you fight when
I know.
You can't hit them. You have to like perfectly do these things. And every time I play that game, I'm like, this is so bad. And I was worried it was going down that road, but it actually remedies itself pretty quick. And I didn't have to look anything up. I was getting flashbacks to that fight, and thankfully it didn't go there.
Yeah, I mean, Garm is definitely the one that I remember the most. But, with Odin, and again, I think this is maybe a bit of an example of where they're trying to go against expectations. But like you'd think he would be like this badass god that's huge and super powerful, but they went the opposite direction and kind of made him like this meek, almost nerdy guy, but who's super sinister and evil underneath that, which I really like.
The actor who played that, it's like a kind of famous TV actor. But I thought he was really good. I loved Odin.
Yeah, he was great.
My biggest complaint about the entire game, the worst thing in the game is end game content. And there's like the trials. What's the realm? I can never pronounce these realms in this game. That's another minor criticism. Can we get realms that are pronounceable? Is it the one with an M? Muspelheim?
Sure.
I think that's
Sounds
close.
right.
I feel like everyone reads those words in different ways.
Yeah, that's close.
I bet if you asked everyone the names of the realms without reading them, we would all pronounce them in different ways.
Big time.
At least that one. You do these trials at the end, and you have to redo the same trials over and over as combinations to unlocking other trials. And you have to walk all the way back, redo a trial you've done 3 times. I eventually looked up the combinations because I'm like, I am not doing these again. Whoever's idea that was, it feels like it was a budget thing or they cut stuff. Fired. That is the worst. That's the worst thing in a game ever. Like, how did that make it into this game? Absolutely brutal.
Who thought this was fun?
100%. Thank you. How did I not bring that up? Who thought this was fun is exactly what I was thinking. Atrocious design for this game. An average game, it would be bad design, but I wouldn't be like it wouldn't stand out as being so repetitive and shitty compared to all the variety. Like, I haven't even talked about you fight 3 dragons as boss fights in the extra game content that are all awesome. They're similar but different. The revenants are generally, those are the Valkyrie equivalents in this game, are fun, except when you fight 2 at the same time. That sucks. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. Everyone hates, in these types of games, dual boss fights. Neo, From Software games, no exception. No one likes them. Stop doing them. I think that's my only actual, like, this is bad in this game. The economies aren't great, but they're not like so bad I'm like, I can't believe this made it into this game. That area is that bad.
So go ahead, Sean.
Well, no, go ahead if you're continuing on that thought.
No, I was not.
Okay, well, I was just going to bring up, like, we kind of talked about the spear as a weapon. We didn't really talk about the additional exploration mechanic that comes from it, and which I liked. And in general, I thought
it's just a gating thing.
Yeah,
it's not that much fun. The fun thing with the spear is the puzzles where you have to like break rocks from different angles and have multiple things before you explode it.
Yeah, I like both of them, but I guess I was just going to mention that it is one of those things where you see these holes in walls, and I think it says like, oh, you don't have the right weapon for that yet or something. I'm not really a fan of that. Like, I don't know really the best way around that in games, but like, at least they tell you. But I generally, that's kind of definitely like an issue in Metroid type games as well, where it's like you've got these things that you come up against, but you don't have the right object for it yet. So that's kind of annoying that's possible. But I guess you knew something was coming. But
yeah, I know what I would do. Clearly there's puzzles that don't need those things later in the game. So just let me get everything in an area when I play it. Like, I don't know why games are so hesitant to do that. Like, it's not, I can't think of one idea that wouldn't have worked in a different area, or it had to be in a particular section and you don't have the thing yet. It's just arbitrary backtracking for completion stuff. And to
juice the runtime.
Or something at that level, which, again, not a deal breaker. Every game does it, but if I was making a game, you can get whatever you need to get while you're there.
The thing I was going to bring up is pretty similar with the environment puzzles. I liked how they incorporated, so Atreus and Freya have these like sigils or whatever you can kind of add onto their bow and arrow. And the one, I think it's called the Hex, right? The purpley one, magenta color one. And so you can use this to sort of like boost the effect of your fire. So you kind of have to like combo them together. You can place up to 3 of these things and you have to kind of combo them. So there are some puzzles. I think they're mostly around lighting the fires to like unlock treasure chests. But there are some pretty challenging ones where you have to place them just right so that when Kratos throws his Chains of Chaos fire mode or whatever they call it and light these things on fire, and they chain just right to get to the right area. And there's also like vines that you need to like specifically hex and stuff, which I thought was an okay way to expand that puzzle set.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this part of the game is bad enough that I blocked it out of my memory. I totally agree with your sentiments. Conceptually, they are awesome puzzles. Like what you have to figure out, or the order, or how to do that stuff they are good puzzles. But the execution of the overlapping, and there was many times where I thought they were overlapping and I was done and it just didn't trigger correctly.
Yes.
So
there's definitely some frustration there.
Yeah.
It's more, it's a lot of it is like a 3D issue where it's like you shoot and it's like on this side of the surface and then the thing's actually on the other side and they don't seem to overlap when it looks like they do.
Even the chaining sometimes where it's like kind of a Venn diagram effect. It would also illuminate the center if they were overlapping. I swear there were times when it was illuminated and it still didn't happen. I was going like, okay, I know I got it this time and it still didn't happen.
Let me guess. The puzzle you're thinking about is in the fire area where there's like a rock face that you need to kind of chain. Okay.
Yes.
I had many where that was an issue.
But so that one was
odd. You brought it up, brother.
The one you're talking about, Huck, was particularly bad because you couldn't see where it was from where you actually through the chain. So you had to run back, check where everything's placed, and then go back, try, fail. And that took forever.
Yeah. And even like when you're shooting the arrows, you have to shoot two from like one perspective and then the last one from another perspective and you're not really sure. Like Frank was saying, like it didn't render properly all the time. So you couldn't always tell if you were even touching it or what. Anyways, that one was super frustrating. That was the one where I was like, do I just give up on this? But no, I stuck with it and figured it out.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I have any other specific gameplay things. Everything else I have is in the realm of story. If it's just like cool characters, polished things, flourishes that I loved. So are we okay to get into that?
So one other thing I just wanted to mention, because we were talking about the different armors and stuff, I was just going to say the one armor that I was using a lot that I liked increased stun. And that's something that's kind of cool, which is obviously there's sort of the finishing move type thing where you have these cutscenes that play out that are pretty bloody. But the stun thing is actually pretty helpful because after a while, you start getting these prompts earlier and earlier in fights to the point where it's you're, 3/4 of the way through and you're already instant killing someone. So it was pretty good.
I can't remember if this was in the first one, but on bosses, you can't stun them. But if you build up their stun meter, it takes a huge chunk of their health off. And I found I use stun more in this game than I did in the previous one. Totally agree. They balanced all of the non-crafting economies much better, except for some of the status effects, I'd say. I also like I don't really understand them in the context of the game, but those phantom bosses that were just the sigils that you would the end animation when you'd crush the ball, and it would be this thing with the statues that you had to destroy, and they're a little more involved, but I usually don't like nebulous kind of bosses like that. But as far as or something like the rock bosses in Metroid, I was always lame. As far as bosses of that nature go, that was a pretty good one.
Cool.
Or large mini bosses, we can call them, something like that. Okay, story-wise. All right. I honestly, Sean alluded to this already. I don't really care about story. I could not give you plot details of this. I still don't understand what Ragnarok is. Why you start Ragnarok. It's a war that has to be started. I will never. Can someone explain Ragnarok to me?
I think it's just a war between all the gods, isn't it? Or is it between gods and humans?
Isn't it weird that you can arbitrarily decide to start? It's just a matter of wars by nature. emerge out of like politics and stuff happening in society. I never understood like the allegory or idea that in mythology a war just starts arbitrarily because you sound some horn.
I think there might be some like they play in this. I think it has to do with like fate, and I think like history is already written sort of mentality. So like when everything is frosting over already and becoming winter, that's like their sign that Ragnarok is beginning. It's kind of like the end of days, kind of like from the Bible.
Yeah,
and stuff.
It's almost like Armageddon, basically.
Yeah, you can't avoid it. It's coming. It's like written in stone. So like the Ragnarok character that is created sort of at the end is just kind of like the culmination of the fate.
So that is, I was trying to think like, what's the major story idea of this game other than like Ragnarok is just a context and it relates to fate. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I would say the major idea is that Atreus gets the knowledge that Kratos will die, right? And he's trying to change fate or make it happen so that Kratos doesn't die, and they can also resolve this conflict with Odin simultaneously. And part of it is the mask from the movie The Mask, which is also a Loki mask in the movie The Mask. I'm pretty sure, with Jim Carrey.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So like that, I think that is a pretty good context, but ultimately the ending is pretty underwhelming to me. Like I don't understand. I don't like stories about fate either, because they always change fate anyway. Like no one really.
Well, I mean, you know who said it the best? Sarah Connor. No fate but what you make. Come on.
But at that point, any plot line with fate, like it would be way more compelling to me if Kratos did die or if something happened of consequence with that. But they don't want to do that either. So I know it's like a carrot on a stick that will not mean anything. It is just a driving force, which I'm okay with. To me, stories are just context for video games, but I'm still waiting for a video game that like actually has a moment that I'm not expecting, or like we're actually going to go there in this game and tell a compelling story in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with what you're saying, but I think what makes the story work for me and that theme of fate is because they tie it to a context of father and son, and the idea of, does a son always have to follow in his father's footsteps, or can he find his own path? And like Kratos is very much wants his son to do things a certain way, also wants to protect him, but like he needs to learn on his side to give him freedom to find his own way, whereas his son kind of has to step up and kind of he does things and has a path that only he can take. So I liked all that stuff. I thought it worked. It does kind of
flip it where this, like in the first game, Kratos is protecting Atreus. There's an element of like, oh, I'm going to protect my dad now, or kind of flip the roles at some level. Which I forgot about one like plot story element idea that is it the Titans or what is it that's captured in those marbles?
Giants.
And I kind of liked how that stuff played out, and there was the snake that escapes and decides what to do with those giants. I can't remember the details, but I remember when I was playing it, like, oh, that's kind of neat that's what those are and how they could use that in the story.
Yeah, I thought there was good. Maybe you could tell. Is there a callback later in the extra content to that snake? Because the snake gets away, you like revive the snake, and then I don't know, a couple hours later, there's like a callback saying like, "Oh, I saw that snake. It's way bigger now." So I was like, this is going to get good. And then nothing.
Would be my guess. I don't remember anything in the extra game content. Now, I really couldn't explain how that giant thing works. I just like the device of the marbles. And I think there is something at the end about rewinding time based on those things, or breaking or capturing someone in one of the like, or is it just giving him the marbles to protect the giants? I don't know. Not a good thing that I can't remember.
Isn't that how they defeat Odin in the end?
Yeah.
I don't know. You just finished it. I don't.
I think so. But, you know, there's also the cool thing with Garm where he becomes like they put the soul of Fenrir, I think, inside him, which is kind of cool. Just complete side note, but we never talked about this, you know, when we initially were talking about this game. But I remember when it first came out, there was a big reaction to people saying, if you like animals, don't play this game because there's some animal death and violence against animals in the game, which is kind of true, you know, with the wolves in particular and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know. I kind of forgot about it by the end. So I don't know if like there are, I feel like there are some animals that you actually fight in the game. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. Well, the Drekkies are kind of animals.
Yeah, that's true.
You fight Atreus as a bear when you don't know it's Atreus.
Right. Do you actually fight wolves at some point as well, or is it
Garm is an animal that looks?
I guess Garm, yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know.
When I'm playing a video game, I don't know. It's just some version of animations and textures. Like I never think I'm killing an animal. I don't think I'm doing anything. I mean, hitbox.
But I mean, that stuff is also character stuff too, right? Like Atreus cares about these wolves quite a bit. Like I feel like you kind of get hit emotionally early and it kind of carries you through the movie. So
movie. Whoa, this guy's dropping the
M-bomb.
the game, the video game that I played.
Said it, bud.
Did not watch. Definitely did not watch it.
That 18-hour YouTube movie.
I did want to bring up, a couple other things story-wise that are kind of a big deal. So Tyr, we mentioned Tyr briefly. He's this character that you rescue early on in the game, and he's kind of like this.
He's a god of war that's like doesn't want to be a god of war anymore.
Yeah, and they think that he's going to help them win Ragnarok, but he doesn't want to. Like he doesn't believe in war, violence. Basically. But then there's a twist at the end where he's actually Odin. And I'm trying to think, like, was he Odin the whole time or did he change at some point?
He was, because they eventually go get they find the real Tyr. I don't know if that's extra content or not, but
that's extra.
You find the real Tyr at some point in the extra content. And I don't buy the twist. It was actually spoiled for me by
it was spoiled for me as well
on YouTube or something, and that pissed me off. But I still, even when it happens, I'm like, I'm not really buying this twist.
Yeah, felt a little forced.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically designed to pull the rug out from under you because you spent all this time with all this character stuff with him, but it all means nothing because it was just Odin.
Why can't Odin be just everyone now? Like, why doesn't he just himself everywhere all the time? Like, it's it's almost multiple identity stuff in movies. Like, it just breaks everything. But another story element tied to fate, small part, like just it's not much visually. When you take the Kelpie, that horse that walks on water and goes underwater, and then you go to the Norns, or I think they're the equivalent of Fates at that tree. Visually, that stuff was amazing.
A little trippy.
That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Everything about that. It's very brief. Like the amount of work and effort went into like a 5 or 10 minute section is ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think around that same time when you're crafting the spear, you take it to this like mermaid thing. And I'm this could end real bad. I don't know what's going on here, but something's going to happen, but then it doesn't.
I think that was in the story trailer, I think. And they came up like, I totally forgot about that Abe Sapien Hellboy kind of character under the water. And that looked awesome too. We mentioned the squirrel, Rada. I always get it wrong. I wrote it down here. That was a stupid name.
Ratataskar or something.
Ratataskar or something like that. But I mean, when Huck got to that character, he's like, holy shit, I just got to the squirrel. It's amazing. Exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
Yes, a fucking squirrel. Amazing. And then I had a character that's barely in it that I thought looked incredible was Derlin. Is it a dwarf that has the octopus and the
I think
monocle?
So. Yeah.
I don't really remember.
He's like
this.
he's
in the
he's like
he's pretty early
pretending
on.
to be on Odin's side, but like he's like helping you, but not making it seem like.
Oh, right.
That character was awesome, and they're barely in it.
Yeah, you meet up with him like maybe halfway through the game, and he's like, "Hey, you could help me," and it's like some side quest.
No, he's part of the main story, like, but it's very brief. Like, is it Svartalheim? You like meet up with him, and he like kind of pushes you.
True. Yeah.
Direction. But yeah, I thought he was going to be in it way more. When I'm like, oh, this character's cool. That reminded me of one last thing or a character. Go ahead, Hawk.
There's one other like pretty big moment where so you have it's Brock and what's the other Sindri. So Sindri is kind of like Atreus's right-hand man, and then Brock is his like blacksmith companion, and Brock ends up dying. I can't actually remember exactly how he dies.
There's a whole B plot about how Sindri brought him back to life. I think that's why he's blue. I don't remember. And he never told him that he can't
he brought him back to life, but he doesn't have a soul anymore.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah. So I actually, we're doing the junkies coming up and characters that die in movies that we're supposed to care about and don't. I actually did mildly care about Brock dying. I thought it was well done. And like in the end game content, there's like a funeral you do and stuff. And I really like that.
I thought what was more well done was how they represented Sindri's reaction to his death, and how he kind of like pieces off and is pissed off and is sad and doesn't want anyone to do with it. Doesn't want anything to do with anyone, and like kind of blames Atreus, it seems, and then ends up basically like just causing shit.
Because then the blacksmiths changed to, I can't remember her name. Like
Linda or something like that.
Yeah. I agree. There was consequences with other characters.
Yeah,
that was well done. Good call.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the stronger. And that's the thing. Like, there's so many characters, but they all as much as we've talked about some sequences drag on or there's long dialogue sequences, but I think a lot of that stuff does pay off. These characters have arcs. They go somewhere. We mentioned Freya as well. She's got a whole thing with Odin and like getting over her issue with Kratos. Like, there's a lot of stuff there.
I've always said the best video game stories are not plot or story dependent. They are character dependent. And that's why the Naughty Dog games are the best at creating characters and new characters. And now Santa Monica has basically entered that realm of characters that are that strong. And the other example, I would say possibly the most beloved story of all time in video games, or up there, is Final Fantasy VII. And it has one of the coolest cast of characters ever. And if you really want to make a great video game story, worry less about plot and making compelling characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, and on that note, like in this game, there's even you wouldn't even consider it in the initial time when you run into them, but it's like that like blonde hair kid outside of the walls of Asgard or whatever it is. And they have like this, city at the foot of the wall of Asgard. That's like, I think they're humans. And they're just like there to do Odin's bidding basically, and like get food from Odin and just basically live there. And it starts off as them just like being kind of like they're just there to live and survive and whatever, not hurt anybody. But then by the end of the game, they're now like Odin's frontline army against the gods and against Atreus. And he's very conflicted as to like how to handle this. Like he's trying to go beat Odin, but in order to do so, he's got to go through basically his friends. He's got to kill his friends to get there. And then it's like this extra motivation when they die, that he blames Odin for. And, you know, there's sort of this dialogue of, you know, who is to blame? Is it Odin or is it us, sort of thing? Like, are they here because we're here, or are they here because Odin put them in the way of us? And did he do it on purpose? Which, you know, they imply he does, which seems like he does. So there is almost like this war storyline, like that you could bring into real life, or like, okay, you know, I mean, we could get real life here, but you know, there's this thing going on in Ukraine right now, and the US just like keeps funneling money, and like, who's going to die? It's going to be the people on the front lines that are going to die. It's not going to be the people making the bombs. So like, there's almost like this real world dichotomy going on that's like happening in this game. That's that's a total, just like, you could just like blink and not even see it, but it's kind of like this real world, you know, thing they're talking about, which is kind of cool. And, you know, a lot of games don't take the time to do sort of like stuff like that, which is,
I guess cool. I didn't, with war stuff, I didn't really even register for me at some level. Like I with Sean was saying, when Ragnarok's happening and it's like this really fast paced section where there's what are the dark elves, they're fighting and all this shit is going. I got the chaos of war, but I guess I didn't get the politics of war in the game, but I wasn't paying that close attention, to be honest. I was like, just
listen to a podcast.
But the actual feeling of war in the climax, I thought was done quite well.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, even just looking at it from a character perspective, I mean, there's everybody's conflicted over a lot of different things that are going on in this. And then that's part of the reason why I think the cast of characters is so big. I mean, you've just got a lot of different interests and relationships that are being strained through this whole ordeal. So, yeah, I mean, I think it does pay off. I get some people are just going to want to skip stuff and not really pay attention to it, but I think it's pretty well done. Especially, you know, again, and we've talked about this before, but like going back to the original God of War games and what Kratos used to be, and the fact that they've just given so much humanity to him now, and like he's got so much depth. It's kind of crazy.
I guess it's interesting that, like, in terms of comparing it to the first series, I legit, we're talking about war in the context of this game. I never am thinking Kratos is the god of war. Like, it's probably a pretty big deal that I don't think about all that often. And to be fair, I don't even remember like the war between Odin and whatever. I don't even know why they're mad at each other. Like I don't know the root causes, which, you know, sometimes with wars, people forget like inciting incidents and how they get to where they are. So maybe that's a commentary on that as well. I don't know. But I for an eye. They're there. I just don't know what they are.
I believe it was the death of Balder.
Right. Okay.
Which I think is how it is in the mythology as well. That's one other thing too. I honestly like don't know how much of this is from mythology and how much of this is made up.
I forgot another character I liked. Freya's brother.
Yeah. Freyr.
Yeah. I forgot about that character. I thought that was actually a decent extra character there. The one story element that didn't work that well for me, and I can't remember much about it, was the flashbacks with Faye, Kratos' wife. I found those sections relatively boring. They have like a fog, like a flashback fog. Visually, I thought they looked bad. And Faye's model in particular was, to me, the most dated, weakest character model in the entire game.
Yeah, it looked kind of particularly felt like plasticky.
Yeah, it did not look good compared to the other ones.
Yeah, and that was one of those sections where it felt like they're giving you like a little bit of gameplay, but really you're not doing anything, and it's just to stretch this out a bit. And it comes at a time in the game where it felt like you're building towards the end, and that, yeah, it definitely dragged a bit. So I agree.
Okay, I think we got to wrap. Like, we're going on and on. Do we have any other major story stuff?
I think we covered it.
Okay,
I mean, those are the major things.
I'm going to spout off like just small things that I absolutely loved. Number one, Niflheim, the Raven tree, like just the look of every time you get a Raven, it gets added to this tree as like a collectible showcase. Looked awesome. My favorite looking areas, I think Svartalheim, which is like these stalactites, calcified terrain, the first major area, new area you go to, I thought was excellent. The desert and the jellyfish side quests, I thought were
forgot about that.
So good. And in Svartalheim, the whale creature that you unlock from under the water, amazing. Blew my mind. I talked about the like spectrum refraction walls in is that Alfheim? I thought looked great. Vanaheim, not the plant area, but the plains. There's like a hidden area that you get teleported to, which is the plains. That's extra game content, which leads to the jungle. I loved that. It
Never
does
did
remind
that.
me. My other criticism of the game, the night and day mechanic. I didn't mind going to the bowl once to do it. I wish you would have just had a way to do it whenever you wanted. I know you like they can't. It's a lot of polish in each area, but I did get annoyed having to. It's just kind of like a mild gating element that I didn't have that much fun with. And Garm, love Garm, everything about Garm. And I think that's everything I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final thoughts or small things that we didn't talk about?
No, I think that's about it for me. Like, I guess I just wanted to mention, like, I know I've seen certainly in the Game Junk Discord, I've seen things being written like we've all been very positive. There has been some disagreement on that. Some people not liking this game as much. I think a lot of it does come down to the story stuff we're talking about and the length of the story stuff and the linearity of it. But be happy to hear in comments what other people's opinions are. Cause for me, it's like just like we've been saying, the magnitude of the accomplishment of this game overall just kind of boggles my mind. So I was a big fan.
And I want to stress, so many big games come out. They break, there's bugs, trophies don't pop, they get patched, then new trophies don't pop. They're all broken. And this would be an easy game to have bugs and people wouldn't even care. They'd be like, yeah, no big deal. It's God of War. I can live with it. And there's very few performance and bug issues. So it's a super polished, super fun experience, obviously in my wheelhouse, but exceeded every expectation I had, and they were already high.
Yeah. I would say that like
Forbidden West.
Yeah. For me, like the story elements that people may have been complaining about, maybe due to like the fact that you get introduced to these characters, they seem interesting, and then they don't really go anywhere. Like the Paint Lady and Freya's brother, whatever his name is. Like these are kind of characters that you're expecting a little more of, maybe, and then they just kind of like fall to the background just when you think they're getting interesting. And there's a bunch of characters like that. There's even a bunch of people at like Freyr's camp that's
the politics of that, and how like there's them versus Odin and you versus them versus Odin. Yeah. I do not understand that.
They like it almost looked like they had big plans to maybe go into that in more detail, and then the game was just like running way too long, and they had way too many areas and kind of ran out of time. But overall, yeah, I agree. Very good game, very fun. Doesn't really drag that much in any one area, and they probably could have shortened it up by a couple hours, but really it's like that's a pretty big nitpick, and the extra content is incredible. Probably the best side quest stuff I've seen in a game.
I generally agree, and ironically, any extra stuff in Elden Ring has been exceptional as well. So Two games
Hey,
that
we're
are
not
more
doing an
sim-
Elden Ring review here,
I know,
bud.
they're more
Stop
similar
bringing
than
up
you might
Elden
think.
Ring.
Anyway, we've gone on forever. We got to wrap this thing up. So thanks for listening or watching. If you're not watching, you can watch it on youtube.com/game junk. There is also a Discord link on there if you want to join the discussion. Let us know how right we are about God of War Ragnarok. Don't tell us how wrong we are. Thanks for listening or watching. Bye-bye.